Start now, Mas. All right. So good afternoon and welcome to the public policy discussion on the topic, the new southbound policy and its impact on the life of migrant workers in Taiwan. We are live via Zoom and also in BBC YouTube channel. My name is Anna from BBC and I will be your host for today. So how is everybody doing? Well, in here it's almost going to rain, so it's kind of hot. But I hope everyone is well and healthy. So this event is being organized by Human Rights Working Group, Taipei Economic and Trade Office in Indonesia, or TETO, and BBC. BBC stands for Better Engagement Between East and Southeast Asia, an online movement building initiative to exchange information and resources, as well as discussions on the rights of migrants and their families across East and Southeast Asia. Before we will start, I will give you a brief background of this event. The new Southbound Policy, or NSP, was first launched in September 2016 as part of Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen's initiative to widen and reinvigorate Taiwan's economy. This policy aims to promote economic and trade collaboration, encourage resource exchanges, and pay attention to talent cultivation and forge regional connectivity through leveraging Taiwan's cultural, educational, technological, agricultural, and other economic assets. The NSP is also a form of Taiwan's effort to expand the country's presence across the Indo-Pacific region. It has been strategized because of the slowing economic growth and the rising wages of workers in mainland China, at the same time with the booming of investment schemes in Southeast and South Asia. The cooperation with countries in these regions will be strengthened by further developing relationships with ASEAN member states, 6 states in South Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. Today, HRWG, together with BBC and TETO, bring you this event to create an avenue where different stockholders can share and exchange ideas and resources on migration and cross-cutting human rights issues. Before we will dive into the discussion, we'll hear first some words from two significant people who made this event possible. Let's welcome Mr. Daniel Awigra, Executive Director of HRWG Indonesia, and Mr. Steve Sengpeng Chen, Deputy Representative of TETO, for their welcoming remarks. Virtual round of applause, please.
Honorable Steve Sengpeng Chen, the Deputy Representative Taipei Economic and Trade Office Indonesia, Pak Yuda Nugraha, Director for the Protection of Citizen and Legal Entities Overseas, Ministry of Foreign Affairs Indonesia, Ibu Fajar from Gabungan Tenaga Kerja Bersolidaritas or GANAS in Taiwan, my friend, my colleague Lennon Yang Wong, the Director of Policies on Migrant Workers, serves the People Association, Taoyuan, SPA from Taiwan. My colleague Rafeni Jamin, Senior Advisor of HRWG, as our moderator today. Distinguished representative from TETO, government of Republic of Indonesia, the representative of ASEAN, migrants community, the representative from CSO and international agencies. Selamat siang and a very good afternoon. On behalf of the Human Rights Working Group and BBC, I'm very honored to welcome you here in the public policy discussion, the new southbound policy and its impact to the lives of migrant workers in Taiwan. On this occasion, I'd like to extend my humble gratitude to the Taipei Economic and Trade Office Indonesia, or TETO, for their generous support, as well as all those who already involved to make this event possible. Indonesia and Taiwan have worked together under the migrant cooperation of the utmost almost 665,000 foreign workers on the island, almost 236,000 or around 35% are Indonesian, according to the Taiwan's Labor Ministry data. That is the highest number of workers in Taiwan. These significant numbers of people working in Taiwan have to be the utmost consideration of every policy both in Indonesia and Taiwan. The presence of the new southbound policy back to 2016 gave a sign that Taiwan would like to expand the country's presence across Indo-Pacific region. The cooperation with the countries in this region will be strengthened by further developing relationship with ASEAN member states plus 6 states including South Asian and Australia and New Zealand. One of the flagship programs of this policy is to promote talent-based migration initiative, and immigrants and migrant workers have become an important target group to be recognized as Taiwan countries and continues to really rely on them for its economic development. Migrant workers make a very significant contribution, especially in the sector such as manufacturing, domestic worker, care worker, and fishing. While all these workers are contributing to the growth of the country's economy, the protection of their rights and dignity are often somehow being overlooked. The question remains, will the new southbound policy improve protection and livelihood of migrant workers in Taiwan, and how to really promote human rights cooperation within new southbound policy with a multi-stakeholder approach? Ladies and gentlemen, this joint event is organized, as our struggle together to ensure the utmost protection of migrant workers across East and Southeast Asia states, particularly to explore the possible avenue for further discussion, taking the initiative brought by the NSP or New Southbound Policy. Lastly, we are really hope that we will have a constructive cross-regional dialogue and engagement among multi-stakeholders. Have a fruitful policy discussion, and I thank you so much. And I give it back to Anna as moderator. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Mas Awi. Now we'll hear from Mr. Chen from TETO Indonesia.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First and most, in my capacity as the Deputy Representative of Taiwan government to Indonesia, I would like to extend my warm greetings to all of you and my appreciation to Human Rights Working Group in Indonesia for holding this webinar entitled The New Southbound Policy and Its Impact on the Life of Migrant Workers in Taiwan. Since the implementation of the new southbound policy in 2016, Taiwan government has spared no efforts in promoting bilateral cooperation in various fields with Indonesia, wherein labor cooperation plays an important part. Taiwan is a democratic country embracing cultural diversity. In fact, Taiwan, although a non-Muslim country, ranks as third top destination for Indonesian migrant workers. This speaks volume and demonstrates that the working environment in Taiwan for migrant workers has been well organized by majority Indonesian migrant workers. Indeed, the excellent measures protecting migrant labor force has made Taiwan a popular option for Indonesian migrant workers. In this regard, please allow me to speak a little further on Taiwan's efforts in protecting the rights of migrant workers. As you may not know, in Taiwan, all migrant workers are entitled to national treatment. This means that foreign workers enjoy the same protection in Taiwan as Taiwanese citizens. For example, all the foreign labor workers in Taiwan entitled the protections stipulated by the Labor Standards Act that sets limits of working hours and guarantees minimum wage. In addition, the employers in Taiwan are required to enroll their workers under the National Health Insurance Scheme. Migrant workers in Taiwan can access high-quality medical care without paying costly medical fees. Furthermore, they all have received free vaccinations in Taiwan, thus maintaining good health during the COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot emphasize more the significant role that people-to-people exchanges plays in enhancing bilateral relationship between Taiwan and Indonesia. In fact, people-to-people cooperation is precisely the core of Taiwan's new southbound policy. I'm confident that the presentation and discussion today will enlighten us to figure out a blueprint for moving forward cooperation between Taiwan and Indonesia in these important areas. Lastly, I wish all of you good health and a big success to today's webinar. Thank you. Terima kasih.
There. Thank you, Honorable Chen. So thank you also, Mas Awi, for delivering such insightful opening remarks. So we'll have first our photo opportunity with the speakers and the organizers. So if you're confident enough, please open up your camera and smile for the world to see. Is there someone who will take the picture already? All right. Anyone from BBC?
All right, I'll take a picture. Okay.
Right.
If you are comfortable, just turn on your camera, and I'll like to count 3, 2, 1, and then on one I'll screen cap. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Ena.
Program. There. So thank you again for showing your esteemed speakers from different sectors. Let us meet them one by one. So our first speaker has been working in the field of foreign labor policy, management, and foreign affairs for more than 17 years. He was responsible for planning of foreign labor policy, prevention of human trafficking, 1955 labor consultation and complaint hotline, foreign worker, airport service center, and etc. Let us welcome our first speaker, Mr. Yu Ko-su. A virtual round of applause, please. Our second speaker has served in the Indonesia Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the last 20 years and has been directing the protection of citizens and legal entities overseas since 2017. His previous roles include the first secretary of the Indonesian Embassy in Kuala Lumpur in the year 2013 to 2016 and head of section for United Nations Development Organizations, Directorate of Economic Development and Environmental Affairs in the year 2010 to 2013. He received his master's degree in Monash University, majoring in diplomacy and trade. Let us welcome our second speaker, Mr. Yuda Nugraha. Thank you. Welcome, sir. Our third speaker is a migrant worker in Taiwan for 9 years. She is the founder of Ghana's community. She is a person engaged in advocacy and counseling for Indonesian migrant workers in various sectors. She is also the head of Ghana's community this year. Please give a virtual round of applause to our third speaker, Ms. Fajar. Last but not the least, our final speaker has 18 years of labor service, in which 7 years in charge of the shelter for migrant workers, now focus on the research and advocacy on the policies and laws on migrant workers. He is committed to eliminate all kinds of discrimination against migrants and immigrants and advocate towards the genuine equality for all migrants. Let us welcome with a warm round of applause, virtual applause, our final speaker, Mr. Lennon Ying Da Wong. Welcome, sir.
Thanks. Hello.
Yes, and of course, to have a very flawless discussion, we also have our moderator with us. He is a senior advisor of HRWG, a member of the Advisory Board of ASEAN CSR Network, and member of the Advisory Group of the Association for the Prevention of Torture, or APT. He served as the first Indonesian representative for the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, or AICHR, from 2009 to 2015, and held the position as the chair of AICHR in 2011. He received his master's degree in development studies in 1989 from the Institute of Social Studies in The Hague, Netherlands. A round of applause to our moderator, Mr. Rafendi Jamin. Welcome, sir. And to officially start the public discussion, I now give the screen to you, Mr. Rafendi.
As well to facilitate the discussion in the next 1 hour and a half or something, to hear views from different sectors. We have two main sectors here. One is the duty holders of human rights. In this case, is human rights protection for migrant workers from the government of Indonesia, as well as from the government of Taiwan, of Republic of China. And we have another sectors as speakers this afternoon from the NGO community or civil society community. One is coming from the migrant workers themselves, who have already self-organized under the leadership of Ibu Fajar, as it was already introduced by Anna earlier. The second is Taiwanese gentleman, Mr. Lennon. I've known him quite so long. Lennon Ying Da Wang. He is coming from the civil society sector. There's some Taiwan NGOs working on the advocacy and for the protection of all migrant workers in Taiwan. It is a very interesting moment to discuss this matter with a very big questions in our discussion, as it was already introduced by our executive director. The new southbound policy, will this policy improve the protection of migrant workers? It is not only, this policy is not only policy for migrant workers. It is a much broader policy on the relation between Republic of China with 10 countries of ASEAN, as well as other states in the region close to Republic of China. So without further ado, and I would like now to invite the first speakers. The order will be that it will be started by Mr. Su, representative from the Ministry of Labor of Republic of China, and then followed by Mr. Yuda Nugraha. Pak Yuda, a very good afternoon to see you. And then followed by the third and fourth speakers in the process. Just one housekeeping I'd like to add on this event. Please use the Q&A, icon in your screen if you have questions directly during the presentation. So without waiting for the turn of having a question and answer, probably the resource person could answer it by typing or directly answer in the icon of Q&A. And after all presentation, all participants will be then upgraded to become all panelists. So that means the opportunity to have a more lively dialogue by raising hand if you have question on, and then speaking and delivering your oral intervention can be done. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Su, Mr. Yo Kusu, to have your presentation. Over to you, Mr. Su.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Su from WDA, Taiwan. It's glad to be here to share with you about protecting foreign workers' rights in Taiwan. Next slide. Based on the employment flow of the foreign worker, Taiwan has the foreign workers' rights protection system. There are 3 phases. Phase 1, before arriving in Taiwan. First, employers who employ a domestic caregiver for the first time have to take employer orientation in order to familiar with related laws. Second, the worker and the employer have to sign a labor contract and the affidavit for salary and expenses in order to clear the amount. Phase 2, after workers arriving, first, the airport care service is going to welcome the workers at the gate and the leading day to arrival. Second, the workers can make a complaint to the 1955 hotline 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, bilingual and toll-free. Third, when a worker and the employer want to terminate the contract, they have to report it to the local government in order to verify the termination of labor contract. Fourth, local government is going to visit worker and the employer in order to check the salary and the living conditions with standards. 5, we also establish a multilingual website to provide employment rights information for workers and the employers. 6, we work with NGOs and the local governments, provide temporary shelters for workers who are under physical violence or labor dispute. In phase 3, before leaving Taiwan, if workers want to make a complaint before a late departure, they can call to 1955 hotline or go to the counter of airport care service. Next. In order to ensure employers who hire domestic workers for the first time are familiar with the related regulations and better understand the rights for both workers and the employer, the Employment Service Act asks employer to take the orientation before applying for an employment permit. The orientation can be held in 3 ways: online, in person, and group classes. The classes duration is 1 hour. The orientation includes what employers should do, can do, and not to do when they decide to hire workers. For example, the employer have to pay salary every month and give worker bilingual salary slip. Next. For the purpose of better protection of worker and the employer, we have 2 airport service stations in north and the south of Taiwan. Before workers arriving in Taiwan, employers have to register the related information, such as arriving date, flight number. For workers' arrival, the bilingual staff will guide them to go through the arrival and the custom procedures, provide a handbook and delivery orientation to them, then help workers waiting for employer picking up. Next. The 24-hour bilingual toll-free 1955 hotline services workers and the employers, and it was established to enhance the worker advisory and the protection network since 2009. As a hub, the 1955 hotline answers all kinds of questions, not only working rights, but also living in Taiwan. As a hub, The 1955 also takes complaints from workers, transfers it to the local governments, and tracks it after 30 days. If workers are in danger, the 1955 can call the police department to help out. Then the local government will provide shelter for workers. Next. To ensure the living conditions meet the standards, employers have to submit the foreign worker living management plan to local government for checking. If any items failed, employers should correct the items to meet the standards within appointed date given by local government. If an employer do not correct it, they will be fined by local government, and their recruitment and employment permits shall be annulled by the MLL. Next. If workers want to terminate their contract and go back to their home country, the employer has to report to the local government to verify the workers' opinion. Then the local government verifies their opinions through a telephone interview or an in-person visit. If any of the details are disputed by either party, the matter will be handled by labor dispute procedures and the workers stay in Taiwan. If employers repatriate workers and fail to report the termination, their application for permits will be rejected. Next. To provide employment rights information for workers and the employers, the multilingual website has employment regulation information, booklets, training films, the 1955 hotline case progress inquiry function, an employer transfer online system, and activities held by local governments. For example, workers can get latest information about COVID-19 prevention and vaccination. Next. If workers are involved in a labor dispute or have dangerous or have undergone violent treatments, the local governments provide a shelter for workers when they are waiting to transfer new employer, investigate, or leave Taiwan. The shelters are funded by the MLL and operating by NGOs. There are 33 shelters around Taiwan. And in 2017, we revised the regulation. The sheltering cost of minor children of sheltered workers can be covered by the MLL because some workers are pregnant and deliver babies in Taiwan. Next. Since 2019, as the pandemic started, we take many prevention measures for employers and the workers, the new arrival and already here, in order to deal with the pandemic. First one is border control. We closed and opened the border few times based on the situation of pandemics in Taiwan and the sending country in the past 3 years. Recently, started on February 2022, we reopened the border to the workers with conditions such as gotten 2 shots and a negative test result within 48 hours before boarding. The workers have to quarantine 14 days before they working in the workplace. Next. Second, For the workers already in Taiwan, the MOL announced and revised the Employer Pandemic Prevention Guide in order to help employers and the workers take prevention actions, such as separating the working and the living movements for the different shifts, requiring business with 30 workers or more to establish a pandemic prevention committee and designate a pandemic prevention work head. Because the situation of pandemic changes rapidly, the new prevention measures and the information have to send to workers and the employers immediately. So last year, the MOL has started a new information broadcast service, 1955 E-Line. We invite workers to join 1955 E-Line as friends and send employment rights and the pandemic information every day to them. The 1955 E-Line also connects to 1955 hotline service. Next. Now we welcome you to join 1955 E-Line. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you for your very comprehensive presentation with regard to the system to protect the rights of migrant workers in Taiwan. And I'd like now to invite the second speaker. It was already introduced by Enna. Yudanugraha, you will have the time more or less about the same like what Sue has already presented, about 10 minutes. Over to you, Pak Yuda.
Thank you, Pak Rapendi. First of all, I would like to convey my gratitude to Pak Daniel Ariga, Pak Stephen, the resource person and other colleagues joining this webinar. Of course, when we are talking about the life of migrant workers in Taiwan, it's always come into our consideration. This issue is of paramount importance for Indonesia. Whenever we are discussing about the protection of Indonesian national living overseas, especially the migrant workers, the protection of Indonesian migrant workers in Taiwan always come into our consideration. Why is that? Because Taiwan is the third largest Indonesian community overseas after Malaysia and Saudi. So it is indeed a great pleasure for me to join this discussion and then discuss with you all about how we can increase the protection of Indonesian migrant workers in Taiwan. So let me give some let me share my quick presentation. There are three pertinent points I would like to discuss with you all. First, about the overview of cases of Indonesian migrant workers in Taiwan. And second, what has been done by government of Indonesia. And the last one, we would like to share with you about our recommendation. First of all, I would like to begin my presentation by giving you this number. So when we are talking about Indonesian living overseas, we have currently around 3.1 million Indonesian living overseas. I have to clarify first about this number. This number is the official number, meaning that this is the Indonesian national report directly to our Indonesian mission overseas. We have 128 Indonesian mission overseas. But of course, we have to admit that this number does not reflect the real number of Indonesian national living overseas. We predict that the real number could be triple. Yeah, around 9 million Indonesian national living overseas. This is also being endorsed by World Bank through its report in 2017, which is said that the number of Indonesian migrant workers overseas is around 9 million. So when we are talking about this number, as I said before, Taiwan become the third largest Indonesian community overseas after Malaysia and Taiwan. We have this is our prediction. The total number of Indonesian in Taiwan around 350,000, yeah, which is 237,000 is Indonesian migrant workers. 23,000 are working as a fisherman. 18,000 Indonesian living in Taiwan as student, and around 46,000 is Indonesian having mixed marriage with Taiwanese national, including their children. And lastly, around 26,000, let me repeat, 26,000 are living overstay in Taiwan. So the total number is around 350,000 people in Taiwan. So when we are talking about the typology of cases, this is the typology of cases of problem faced by Indonesian national living overseas. Last year, in total, we have handled around 29,000 cases all around the world. Yeah, this number actually decreased by half compared to the number of cases in 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic started at that time. So in 2020, the total number of cases faced by Indonesian national is around 54,000. So last year is quite decreasing. And there are many cases faced by our Indonesian national, and of course this related to also our Indonesian migrant workers. So when we are talking about the protection of Indonesian national, of course we are talking about the protection of Indonesian migrant workers, because from 2.1 million Indonesian living overseas, 93% of it is Indonesian migrant workers. So there are many cases faced by Indonesian migrant workers, fishermen and seafarer, trafficking in person, overstayer, labor issue, yeah, health issue. Of course, during the pandemic, this become prevalent. Criminal act and capital punishment, and thanks God there is no capital punishment in Taiwan. Evacuation, especially during the pandemic COVID, and also during the armed conflict. Yeah? We lastly evacuate our Indonesian national from Kabul, as well as from Ukraine. Hostages cases, there are 54 hostages cases from 2016 until now. Mostly these cases happen in South Philippines and other cases. Now I would like to explain a little bit about the typology of cases in Taiwan. First, about fishermen and seafarer. Yeah, there are fishermen of Indonesian fishermen working in Taiwan. First, as a fisherman working in territorial water of Taiwan, and second, fisherman working through letter of guarantee mechanism, yeah, in distant waters. Yeah, and also seafarer. Seafarer, this is Indonesian seafarer working both in commercial vessel under the flag of Taiwan, as well as the owner of the vessel is owned by Taiwanese. I will explain in detail in a next slide. And second, trafficking in person. Yeah. Yes, the number of Indonesian working in Taiwan, of course, using a legal channel, but there are also Indonesian migrant workers, which is the victim of human trafficking. Yeah, there are two major modus in this regard. First, about the deception. The trafficker usually giving promise to the victim about the the job opportunities in formal sector in Taiwan with good salary. And then the second modus is using the debt bondage. Yeah. Usually the family of the migrant workers are given the money, upfront money, yeah. But this is as the debt bondage. Yeah. So whenever the victim have problem in Taiwan and change his mind to come back to Indonesia, the trafficker will use the debt bondage as a threat. The third problem is overstayer. Yeah. For us, the overstayer or Indonesian living without proper working permit in other countries is not only a matter of immigration cases. The overstayer or the undocumented Indonesian migrant workers is the entry of other major cases. Because whenever our Indonesian migrant workers living without proper working permit, it will make their position become vulnerable and prone to be exploited. Yeah, of course, when they are living illegally in other countries, they have no bargaining position to their employers, and then they are being prone to be exploited. Yeah. And other issue also, whenever they are living illegally in other countries, the local regulation doesn't give sufficient protection for them, especially in health issue. I will come back to that issue later. Labor issue. Yeah, there are two major labor issue. Yeah, first unpaid salary. Yeah? And second, abscond. Yeah, abscond. The abscondment can come with so many reasons. Yeah, most of them because of their victim of human trafficking. Yeah, because they are being promised to work in a formal sector with good salary, but whenever they come to Taiwan, they have to work in a domestic sector with a lower salary, and it enough reason for them to be abscond. Yeah, from their employer. Health issue. Yeah, one of the biggest challenges faced by IETO in Taiwan is because many Indonesian, mostly undocumented, having a health issue. They have to be admitted to the hospital, but then they didn't have money to pay the hospital. Yeah, and then the bill comes to IETO to be paid. Of course, this has become a great issue for us because we don't have enough budget for that. And of course, we rely, hopefully we rely on local regulation to handle this case. Criminal Act mostly is related to theft and also murder. Violence against women migrant workers. We have recorded some cases of Indonesian women migrant worker become a victim of rape. And lastly, undocumented children. I will explain in detail about this later. Now, I would like to elaborate more about the prevalent cases in Taiwan, especially the protection for our fishermen, especially working under the letter of guarantee mechanism. So the letter of guarantee refers to the Indonesian seafarer working in distant water vessel, both commercial and fishing vessel. So in Taiwan, our fishermen working, as I said before, working in the territorial water of Taiwan, yeah, and second, working in distant water. With regard to seafarer or fishermen working in territorial water, we don't have many problems actually. The most challenges come from the fishermen working in LNG scheme or in distant water because they are not subject of labor law in Taiwan, resulting to lower salary and protection. Many agencies in Indonesia also do not have sufficient information about the principle on ship owner. So whenever problems occur, many agencies in Indonesia rely heavily on many agencies in Taiwan. And there's also absence of proper working contract and also standardized working contract. Salary payment, this become one of the biggest issue we face. There is a long chain of payment resulting to even lower salary. So the salary from a ship owner being transferred to manning agencies in Taiwan, and then transfer again to manning agencies in Indonesia, and then finally transfer to the family of seafarer in Indonesia. Whenever the unpaid salary problem comes, so the stakeholders between the owner, the manning agency in Taiwan, manning agencies in Indonesia, usually are finger pointing to each other. So we are caught in the middle of the dispute between the ship owner, manning agencies in Taiwan, Indonesia, whenever the unpaid salary problem arrives. And then unfavorable working condition on board. Of course, we do acknowledge that working in a fishing vessel is regarded as the 3D, dangerous, difficult, and demeaning. But of course, this is our hope that the working condition in fishing vessel could be promoted. So there's a decent working condition for our fishermen in fishing vessel, especially fishing vessel from Taiwan. Language barrier also become one of the challenges. Physical violence and trafficking person, as I said before, many of Indonesian fishermen working in the LG scheme in Taiwan are prone to be the victim of human trafficking because they are not being placed to Taiwan fishing vessel through proper channel. They are mostly coming from Java Island. Java Island. Usually they are working in agriculture sector and then being promised to work in Taiwan, but end up as the fishermen, and then they have to work in distant water, not in Taiwan, but in middle of the high seas, in Pacific, Atlantic, and other ocean. And this is the problem of undercompensated Indonesian children. We are becoming more concerned about this because the number is increasing all the time. Up until now, around 90 Indonesian children under the care of Harmony Orphanage. There are a few cases, around 6 cases we have classified in this regard. First is a child whose birth certificate issued by hospital and stating that the mother is Indonesian. Of course, according to our citizen law, number 12, year 2006, whenever one of the parent is Indonesian, then the children has the right to be holding the Indonesian citizenship. So whenever the certificate issued by hospital stating that the mother is Indonesian, then the child has dual citizenship as Indonesian. Second problem, a child born without birth certificate whose Indonesian mother is still contactable in Taiwan. And third problem, child without birth certificate whose parents are not longer reachable in Taiwan, but there is witness stating that the mother is Indonesian. The fourth challenges, there are children without birth certificate whose mother is unknown. So this is quite difficult for us because the mother is of Indonesian is only by saying. And then the fifth problem, child whose Indonesian mother's location in Taiwan is unknown, without birth certificate, but maternal family in Indonesia is acknowledged that this child is Indonesian and still traceable. We still can contact the family in Indonesia. And last problem is a child temporarily left in orphanage as the mother is still working. And somehow the mother doesn't want to take care of his children, yeah, because they are focusing on working in Taiwan. And this is what we have done so far to provide protection for Indonesian national, especially Indonesian migrant workers in Taiwan. First, of course, we provide consular assistance. With regard to this consular assistant, our EAT office will refer to the principle of protection of Indonesian national. First, pursuing the responsibility of relevant parties. Yeah. Second, we are not taking over the criminal and civil responsibility. And lastly, the protection of Indonesian national will respect the domestic and international law. There are several things that we have done in cooperation with IETO. Lastly, we repatriate 105 fishermen through LG scheme, Sivera, in 2021. This is Sivera, not fishermen. This is because they are facing difficulty to having crew change, because there are many Taiwan commercial vessel in territorial water of Taiwan. They have to do the crew change, but because of the local regulation doesn't allow the crew change during the pandemic of COVID-19, then they have to be stranded for months in the commercial vessel. And then we send a special aircraft in coordination with our IETO and TETO to repatriate them to Indonesia. We also provide family reunification. We have repatriated the undocumented Indonesian children, 21 Indonesian and undocumented Indonesian children in 2019. And we are looking forward to repatriate more of them. But of course, we are not seeking not only repatriate them, but we want to also address the root causes of this problem. And this is one of the information for you about the performance of protection of Indonesian national around the world. Yeah, I can skip on this. Lastly, about recommendation. So there are several recommendations I would like to share with you, and we are open to discuss this. First, of course, we would like to suggest that with regard to the protection of domestic workers and seafarers working in LG scheme, we hope that both sectors should be regulated under labor law, which is currently both sector is not regulated under the labor law of Taiwan. And second, implementing ethical recruitment and employment of Indonesian migrant workers, especially seafarer and domestic workers. Why we highlight about domestic worker and seafarer and also fishermen, because those sector is quite vulnerable with regard to labor cases and other cases. And then third recommendation, joint effort in raising awareness on productive health. This is one of the solution to address the root causes of the prevalent issue of undocumented children, Indonesian children in Taiwan. And fourth recommendation about ensuring access for crew change for all seafarer, including during the pandemic COVID-19. Of course, in this regard, we acknowledge the importance of Taiwan to protect or to handle the COVID-19 pandemic. But of course, in the name of humanity, because we have also a responsibility to take care the seafarers living in so many commercial vessels in Taiwan territorial water, and they are stranded for months. So we have to find solution on this. And in this regard, Indonesia has become one of the sponsors in the UN for specific resolution on the protection of seafarers during the pandemic COVID-19. And in this regard, we also have showcased our willingness to allow crew change in Indonesia. So we would like also to hope Taiwan can follow suit about this policy. And lastly, we propose to establish MOU between IATO and TETO for placement and protection of Indonesian fishermen in Taiwan. We acknowledge there are so many problems faced by Indonesian fishermen in Taiwan, especially in LG scheme. But through cooperation between IATO and TETO, we hope that this problem could be solved amicably, and then we can provide a safe corridor for Indonesian fishermen working in Taiwan fishing vessel in distant water. And I believe this MOU could also serve the interest of stakeholders in Taiwan, especially the owner. So, Pak Raffendi, colleague, this my last slide about my presentation. We look forward to further discussion about this. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pak Yuda. I cannot stop your presentation because it's too important. You have taken more than 15 minutes, but that's fine.
I'm sorry, Pak. I'm sorry.
All right. Yes, you have already identified in your, or highlighted particularly, the most vulnerable group of the migrant workers, Indonesian migrant workers in Taiwan, very specific of the overstayers, the seafarers, as well as the undocumented children. And then you came up with some recommendation, which actually directly, how do you call that, related with the policies among the two countries. So before I go further to the next speakers to listen to the views from the civil society sector, I'd like actually to invite Mr. Su to give a very short response on the proposed, on the presentation of the most vulnerable groups. Yeah, you mentioned about the system, but you did not quite mentioning about the most vulnerable groups in your presentation, like it was mentioned in the presentation of Ayuda. So if you have, can I ask you to give a very short, response, in this discussion? This is how do you call that? This is quite a free discussion that we will respect opinions, views of each speaker. May I invite just a very short response, about 1 minute. Mr. Su, over to you.
Okay. Very quick response to the presentation. First one, the Distant Fishery Act is in Taiwan implemented right now. So the act can protect distant fishery workers' rights. And the government passed the Fishery and the Human Rights Action Plan. We will try to improve the distant water fisheries workers' rights, and we will do our best for that. And about the undocumented workers' children, the MLL found the NIA right now and to sheltering those children and help them to find their parent. Maybe I just respond to this for sure, and I can respond for later. Thank you.
I really appreciate that, Mr. Su, for your quick response. I'm glad to hear that there is already some thought to include that in the Human Rights Action Plan, as you mentioned, very particular, addressing the most vulnerable group in the migrant workers in Taiwan. Okay, let us now go listen to the views and probably also response from the civil society sectors. Now, the first speaker will be Ibu Fajar from Ganas community. Ganas is very scary, isn't it? Ganas, Indonesia means well, okay, positively, it's a very strong. Ganas community is an organized migrant workers organization, Indonesian migrant workers organization in Taiwan. Ibu Fajar will make a presentation in Indonesian language. So I like to invite all who doesn't understand Indonesian language, please go and click the icon under your screen with a globe icon, interpretation, and click Indonesian. So you will hear a simultaneous presentation into English. I hope I make myself clear, so then I can then invite Ibu Fajar. You have about 10 to 15 minutes to deliver your presentation. Also, probably also directly respond to the presentation from Mr. Su and Mr. Yuda Nugraha. Over to you, Ibu Fajar.
Terima kasih untuk semuanya. Selamat siang. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yang terhormat Bapak Yuda Nugraha, Direktur BWNI Kementerian Luar Negeri Indonesia, Mr. Yuko Su, Kementerian Ketenagakerjaan Taiwan, dan juga Mr. Leonard Jing dari Direktur Pusat Pelayanan dan Penampungan bagi Pekerja Migran Serve the People Association Taiwan, serta penyelenggara forum diskusi saat ini, dan juga tak lupa kepada teman-teman dan para peserta yang hadir. Perkenalkan, saya Fajar, pekerja migran dari Indonesia yang ada di Taiwan dan telah bekerja kurang lebih 10 tahun sebagai penjaga pasien. Pada tahun 2017 bersama dengan teman-teman pekerja migran Indonesia yang lain, kami mendirikan Ganas Community, organisasi yang berbasis di Taiwan dan bergerak dalam bidang advokasi dan pendampingan kasus sengketa ketenagakerjaan. Bertujuan untuk memberdayakan PMI dengan memberikan informasi dan edukasi serta sosialisasi tentang hak dan kewajiban sebagai pekerja migran, dan membantu menyelesaikan permasalahan agar pekerja mendapat hak-hak sesuai aturan hukum di Taiwan. Kami juga berjejaring dengan NGO lokal Taiwan dan juga organisasi pekerja baik yang ada di Taiwan itu sendiri maupun yang ada di negara penempatan lain, khususnya di Asia Pasifik. Dan di sini saya akan memaparkan kondisi dan situasi pekerja migran sesuai dengan pengalaman saya pribadi tentunya, dan juga pengalaman selama 5 tahun dalam berorganisasi, termasuk bagaimana situasi Taiwan sebelum diberlakukan the New Southbound Policy tahun 2016. Hingga saat ini, pekerja migran masih rentan menjadi korban overcharging atau kelebihan biaya penempatan. Perekrutan penempatan PMI yang masih melalui PJTKI dan agensi, dan kita tahu bahwa PJTKI dan juga agensi adalah perusahaan swasta berbasis bisnis yang tentunya mengutamakan keuntungan. Dan prosedur perekrutan rentan dengan pungutan liar, biaya yang dikeluarkan pun oleh pekerja migran jauh melebihi cost structure yang dikeluarkan oleh pemerintah Indonesia. Mulai dari paspor, medikal, dan proses lainnya, JPMI kerap mengeluarkan biaya lebih dari aturan instansi negara kami karena masih maraknya pungutan liar. Dan JPMI pun harus membeli job dengan biaya yang tinggi karena PJTKI selama ini beralasan bahwa job ini juga membeli dari agensi di Taiwan. Kemudian adanya culture shock. Dari pengalaman dan pengamatan kami selama ini, banyak kami dapati bahwa pekerja migran kurang mendapat pembekalan dan pengetahuan yang memadai tentang situasi dan kondisi di negara penempatan. Dalam hal ini di Taiwan, baik keterampilan, bahasa, maupun regulasi tentang peraturan ketenagakerjaan, dan bagaimana berinteraksi dalam kehidupan sosial serta bermasyarakat di Taiwan. Dan PAP sebagai salah satu prosedur untuk pemberangkatan selama ini hanya sebagai formalitas. Dan kemudian adanya perbedaan golongan pekerja migran. Di Taiwan, pekerja migran dibedakan menjadi dua kelompok. Pekerja migran kerah putih dan juga kerah biru. Pekerja migran seperti kami di Taiwan adalah pekerja migran kerah biru dengan kondisi kerja yang buruk dan berisiko 3D, dangerous, dirty, and difficult, yang rata-rata pekerja lokal tidak mau melakukan pekerjaan ini. Dan pekerja kerah biru pun masih juga terbagi menjadi dua sektor, yaitu pekerja sektor formal dan juga pekerja sektor informal. Untuk sektor formal mencakup konstruksi, manufaktur, dan panti jompo. Sektor formal ini terlindungi Undang-Undang Layanan Ketenagakerjaan Taiwan. Sedangkan sektor informal seperti saya, itu tidak masuk dalam undang-undang itu dan tidak terlindungi, sehingga rentan dengan eksploitasi karena harus tinggal 24 jam di rumah majikan tanpa ada batasan jam kerja. Hak libur tidak pasti, dan upah jauh di bawah standar upah minimum di Taiwan, serta minimnya jaminan hukum, serta jaminan asuransi. Pembatasan masa kontrak di Taiwan juga sangat bermasalah di sini, dan sebelum tahun 2012, masa kontrak kerja di Taiwan maksimal adalah 9 tahun. Dan awal tahun 2012 kemarin, masa pemerintahan Presiden Tsai Ing-wen dirubah menjadi 12 tahun bagi sektor formal dan 14 tahun untuk sektor informal hingga saat ini. Dan kemudian saya juga akan paparkan bagaimana kondisi pekerja migran ya selepas tahun 2016. Dan tentunya sesuai dengan tema hari ini, yaitu tentang kebijakan New Southbound Policy. Akhir tahun 2016, setelah melalui perjuangan panjang para pegiat, pemerhati, organisasi, dan LSM masyarakat yang concern dan peduli terhadap pekerja migran, pemerintah Taiwan mengeluarkan aturan perpanjang kontrak tanpa harus pulang. Hal ini diharapkan agar dampak baik bagi kami, pekerja migran, karena lebih efektif dan efisien dari waktu dan biaya. Namun pada kenyataannya, karena pemerintah Taiwan masih melimpahkan penanganan para pekerja migran kepada agensi, sehingga monopoli masih terus berlangsung. Di mana pasar job dikuasai oleh agensi, sehingga ketika akan pindah majikan, baik karena putus kontrak ataupun finish karena harus membayar biaya job yang tinggi kepada agensi. Dan walaupun pemerintah Indonesia dalam hal ini KDII mengeluarkan edaran pengumuman yang tertulis dalam nomor 1255 garis miring KA garis miring KDI garis miring 12 tahun 2017 bahwa akan mengkonfirmasi pekerja migran yang akan legalisasi perpanjang kontrak. Namun kenyataannya, hingga hari ini, KDI dalam hal ini Adnaker tidak melakukan hal itu. PMI hanya bisa melaporkan setelah menjadi korban dan telah tanda tangan dalam kontrak barunya. Dan pemerintah Taiwan pun juga sudah mengeluarkan aturan bahwa perpanjang kontrak tidak dipungut biaya, hanya biaya leges di WDA sebesar 300 NT dan juga ARC 1000 NT per tahun dan juga biaya fee agency 1.500 NT per bulan. Bahkan terbaru Dalam masa pandemi, Depnaker juga mengeluarkan sebuah aturan atau di sini sebuah sayembara, di mana jika ada yang bisa membuktikan jual beli job akan mendapatkan kompensasi 20.000. Namun sepertinya ini sangat sulit sekali, karena siapapun yang melaporkan dalam posisi masih bekerja tentunya juga rentan intimidasi. Sedangkan di luar sana, kalau mereka di PHK, mereka tetap akan harus membayar biaya job lagi. Dan kemudian di sini pada tahun 2019 untuk mengurangi biaya majikan, merekrut pekerja nelayan, pemerintah Taiwan mengabaikan masalah upah lembur, waktu istirahat, dan juga akomodasi yang jelas dilindungi oleh Undang-Undang Tenaga Kerja. Walaupun ABK masuk dalam sektor formal, namun semua itu tidak diberikan. Semakin memburuknya jam kerja, waktu istirahat, dan juga masalah lain bagi para pekerja nelayan. Dan hal itu berlangsung hingga saat ini. Dan tahun lalu, karena masalah epidemi, kurangnya tenaga kerja, demi kepentingan majikan, pekerja rumah tangga, Kementerian Tenaga Kerja mengeluarkan revisi untuk mengikat pekerja rumah tangga dari migran untuk pindah ke pabrik. Dan tahun ini, Eksekutif Yuan dalam waktu yang singkat juga membuat rencana tentang relokasi dan retensi pekerja migran jangka panjang. Dan sama juga, majikan mengalami tekanan karena kekurangan tenaga kerja. Dan diskusi secara non-demokratis pun juga lolos. Bahkan waktu itu kami juga melalui diskusi di kantor legislatif dan juga di kantor UN untuk mengungkap serta menyuarakan kasus ini. Dan semua harus tahu bahwa pekerja rumah tangga sebenarnya juga punya kontribusi layaknya seperti pekerja lain. Dan kami pun juga manusia yang sebenarnya mempunyai hak untuk hidup menjadi lebih baik. Dan juga retensi pekerja migran jangka panjang ini ada manfaatnya tentunya bagi pekerja migran, tapi masih melanjutkan poros anti kebebasan. Dengan amandemen pasal 54 ayat 3 yang itu mengikat kami tidak bisa pindah majikan dalam kondisi tertentu yang dikecualikan, yaitu ketika pekerja migran rumah tangga terjadi kekerasan seksual, kekerasan fisik, ataupun juga menjadi korban human trafficking, kami harus melalui proses pindah lintas sektor, di mana dalam 14 hari setelah pemutusan kontrak kerja, setelah permit turun, ya, dalam 14 hari tidak ada majikan dari sektor yang sama yang interview, yang wawancara, baru kami bisa pindah ke pabrik. Padahal harapan kami pindah ke pabrik adalah ingin ada perbaikan dari jam kerja, hak libur, dan juga gaji yang setiap ada peningkatan dari layanan ketenaga kerjaan dan juga dari Taiwan, kami juga ikut merasakan. Namun hingga dalam 6 tahun terakhir, pekerja migran rumah tangga tidak ada kenaikan gaji. Kami hari ini hanya 17.000 NT dolar per bulan. Jadi kami hanya menikmati kenaikan biaya asuransi kesehatan yang terus meningkat dari tahun ke tahun seiring dengan perkembangan gaji dari sektor formal. Dan yang terbaru, pemerintah Taiwan mengeluarkan wacana untuk memudahkan pekerja migran mengurus APRC. Dan melalui aplikasi menjadi pekerja teknis menengah dulu 6 tahun dan juga dengan persyaratan gaji 24.000 baru kami bisa mendapatkan APRC. Sedangkan untuk mendapatkan gaji 24.000, pemerintah Taiwan tidak ada intervensi karena majikan yang hanya menggaji 17.000 tidak melanggar hukum. Jadi bagi kami dengan gaji 24.000 itu adalah perjuangan dan negosiasi pekerja migran dengan majikan. Dan agensi swasta nantinya masih tetap memiliki hak dan kedudukannya. Pekerja migran rumah tangga yang dipekerjakan oleh keluarga individu, bahkan jika menjadi pekerja teknis tingkat menengah ini pun juga tidak memiliki hak untuk menerima upah dasar. Dari hal ini semua, kami juga berharap, dan tadi juga sudah disampaikan oleh Pak Yuda, bahwa jumlah pekerja ataupun yang termasuk dalam semua warga negara Indonesia yang ada di Taiwan berjumlah 350.000, terbagi dalam beberapa elemen. Begitu banyaknya jumlah WNI di Taiwan, namun tidak diimbangi dengan penambahan staf, sehingga kita tahu dari KDII dalam hal ini merasa kewalahan untuk menangani permasalahan. Dan itu pun juga berimbas kepada kami. Dari Adnaker, mereka sudah menyiapkan satgasnya di beberapa wilayah. Namun, kembali lagi harus diketahui bahwa penanganan masalah akan dikembalikan lagi kepada agensi. Dan kalau dikembalikan lagi kepada agensi, otomatis pekerja migran harus mengalami intimidasi di situ. Dan sulitnya masuk ke shelter yang dipunyai oleh KDII, shelter dalam hal ini adalah shelter untuk menampung teman-teman pekerja migran yang resmi, juga tidak gampang. Dan juga untuk dari keimigrasian dalam masa pandemi, demi katanya untuk melindungi dari penyebaran COVID, mempunyai kebijakan mengeluarkan sebuah aturan hanya 3 bulan paspor yang mau kadaluarsa baru bisa diurus. Sehingga menimbulkan permasalahan lagi. Banyak teman-teman yang melalui agensi paspor diurus terlambat, dan ini juga menimbulkan permasalahan sendiri, mempunyai dampak psikologis yang luar biasa, karena izin tinggal mereka juga nantinya akan ada keterlambatan. Dan ini kami harap dari pihak KDI, terutama dari imigrasi ya, untuk memperbaiki hal ini. Dan juga katanya lagi demi pandemi, dari imigrasi mempunyai kebijakan lagi. Tahun sebelumnya, di mana Sandi Service ini dilakukan dalam 1 bulan 2 kali, namun untuk beberapa bulan terakhir hanya sebulan sekali. Dan kembali lagi, tidak semua pekerja migran bisa mendapatkan hak libur, ya. Dan tentunya ketergantungan terhadap agensi masih mendominasi. Dan kemudian segala permasalahan tadi juga menimbulkan banyaknya permasalahan. Salah satunya adalah pekerja migran menjadi pekerja kaburan atau undocumented. Dan kembali lagi, memang pemerintah kami dalam hal ini, KDI juga sekarang ada bagian khusus ya untuk perlindungan warga negara Indonesia di Taiwan. Namun karena begitu banyaknya masalah, dan lagi-lagi juga menimbulkan kerentanan yang luar biasa, khususnya ini walaupun sudah ada shelter dari WNI overstay ya, namun karena jumlahnya dan juga tempat juga terbatas, sehingga teman-teman yang menyerahkan diri kembali lagi harus melalui calo atau maklar. Dan kemudian harapan kami adalah baik ini untuk pemerintah Taiwan ataupun pemerintah Indonesia, agar PRT di negara kami juga disahkannya RUU PPRT, sehingga ketika kami berteriak untuk meminta perlindungan agar PRT dimasukkan dalam Undang-Undang Ketenagakerjaan, ini juga seimbang. Ketika di negara kami sendiri dilindungi, otomatis ketika kita meminta perlindungan di negara Taiwan, kita juga tidak merasa keberatan. Dan kemudian kami juga berharap adanya pembenahan dalam perekrutan penempatan kami di Taiwan, dengan melalui kontrak mandiri, dengan tidak ada melalui PJTKI ataupun juga agensi. Kembali lagi, pelindungan dari negara kami dan juga negara penempatan itu bukan hanya sebagai lip service, karena permasalahan memang utama dari hal ini. Dan juga kami berharap yaitu adanya penghapusan masa kontrak kerja di Taiwan tanpa ada syarat. Untuk saat ini karena pandemi, lagi-lagi ini adalah demi untuk menyediakan tenaga kerja ya bagi majikan dalam masa pandemi. Untuk tahun ini ada penambahan hingga 1 tahun. Namun ini tidak bisa menyelesaikan persoalan adanya overstay. Jadi kami berharap agar penghapusan masa kontrak kerja di Taiwan ini direalisasikan. Dan kemudian kami juga berharap adanya program perawatan jangka panjang dan BRT pun juga dimasukkan dalam program ini. Dan lagi ya, untuk kami juga berharap kepada pemerintah Indonesia untuk lebih sering mengadakan diskusi dengan organisasi pekerja migran secara periodik, terutama untuk organisasi-organisasi yang bergerak dalam bidang ketenaga kerjaan. Dan ini saya juga akan menambahkan bagaimana adanya banyak kasus dalam masa pandemi ini, terutama di tahun awal-awal 2022 hingga hari ini, begitu banyak masalah di mana teman-teman kami ini tidak dipisahkan ketika mereka bekerja dalam rumah dan harus tetap bekerja dengan merawat pasien yang positif. Jadi kita disatukan di dalam rumah dengan yang positif dan kita tetap dipaksa bekerja walaupun kita dalam keadaan sakit. Yang kedua adalah pembatasan hak libur dengan alasan nanti pekerja akan memaparkan atau menularkan COVID-19. Dan juga tidak tersedianya bahan makanan yang cukup bagi yang teman-teman yang isolasi mandiri, sehingga kami dari Ganas Community juga berinisiatif untuk memberikan bahan makanan bagi teman-teman yang saat ini mengalami sedang dalam masa karantina. Dan juga kami juga tidak ada kejelasan tentang aturan bahwa pekerja migran rumah tangga yang tidak bekerja ataupun juga dari itu ya teman-teman ABK yang tidak bekerja dalam masa karantina atau sedang menjalani pengobatan, itu nanti gaji dipotong atau tidak. Tapi yang terjadi adalah memang banyak gaji kami yang dipotong ketika dalam masa karantina. Sedangkan untuk pekerja formal itu bisa mengklaim ASTEK. Dalam masa 4 hari ke depan, mereka bisa untuk mengklaim ASTEK dengan syarat mempunyai surat izin dokter ataupun majikan harus melaporkan ke 1922. Namun di lapangan, banyak sekali majikan yang tidak melaporkan pabrik-pabrik ini, perusahaan mereka kepada 1922 bahwa ada dari karyawan mereka yang terpapar. Dan syarat untuk mendapatkan surat izin kerja, surat izin dari dokter sebagai untuk klaim ASTEK ini pun juga terkendala. Karena jangankan untuk libur, untuk ke dokter, untuk keluar ruangan saja mereka tidak diperbolehkan. Jadi ini harus banyak evaluasi dari pemerintah Taiwan sendiri terkait dengan adanya pandemi. Terima kasih. Itu saja yang perlu saya sampaikan dan semoga menjadi pertimbangan untuk perbaikan selanjutnya. Karena pekerja migran seperti kami juga mempunyai kontribusi terhadap ekonomi di Taiwan. Namun, sekali lagi, kami tidak diakui sebagai pekerja layaknya karena kami tidak masuk dalam Undang-Undang Ketenagakerjaan. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Baik, Ibu. Terima kasih, Ibu Fajar, atas paparan dan pengalaman yang disampaikan, terutama juga usulan-usulan konkret ya di lapangan terkait dengan pelaksanaan dari kebijakan. Ya, yang masih banyak perlu diatasi. Bagaimana memecahkan masalah pelaksanaan. Why am I speaking in Indonesian? Thank you so much. I forgot now. Yes, thank you so much, Ibu Fajar. And I think you have already presented a very useful information on the ground. How the gap between policy and the implementation, very particularly on the extension of stay, yeah, with the new southbound policy, the extension of the contract, it is not limited to 12 and 14 years, but on the implementation, there are still problems because basically the regulation is so much monopolized by the agency. Apparently, according to your view, your opinion, that the management to implement the policy is so much given to the agencies instead of under strict control of Taiwanese government. That's a very good point. And you also mentioned about your appeal on to the Indonesian side, that to go further with the legislation on the protection of domestic workers in Indonesia that will help your work and your position as a domestic workers abroad. And you also address and propose a very good proposal with regard to the recruitment. Yeah, recruitment, which is also mentioned by recommendation by Pak Yuda earlier on the ethical recruitment. Ethical recruitment is very broad, but you come with very specific proposal on the to allow the mandiri. The mandiri is independent recruitment. You know, so you are not depend on the agencies or when you are going to work, when someone's going to work abroad. Yes, you mentioned also very specific issues with regard to the pandemic situation, that on the implementation, you know, protecting the public health apparently has sacrificed, you know, the basic rights of domestic workers, especially with regard to the right to have a free days and the support during the quarantine process. Thank you so much for that very concrete proposals, and that can be directly actually there later on response by Yuda and Mr. Su. But before that, I'd like now to invite the last speakers in our session. That's Mr. Lennon. In the meantime, you can also check out, all of us can check out the Q&A. There are already questions put in the Q&A box. So kindly, if you would like to answer that, you can answer it by typing, and later on we can again highlight it orally. Now, I'd like to invite the last speakers. Mr. Lennon, over to you. You have 15 minutes to go.
Okay, thanks a lot, Brother Rafendi. And thanks a lot for all the former speakers, Mr. Su, our old and respected official in Taiwan, Bayuda, and our old friend, Fajar. Especially thanks for Fajar's valuable insights as a caretaker. Actually, I wasn't prepared to respond to like what Mr. Su has, because I was told for this webinar should be specific on southbound policy, new southbound policy. But because of what from the former speakers, I have some points first before my own speech. So for the first, about the human trafficking or forced labor, I will say from my point of view, most of the migrant workers in Taiwan, they have the risk, a very, very big risk of forced labor and human trafficking, because most of them, they have to pay a very big amount of placement fee. So that makes them for a very big debt bondage. And yeah, and many of them, they don't have the passport and ARC, that's alien certificate, resident certificate. Many of them, they don't have their either passport or ARC or both at their hand when they're working. And many of them, they don't have their employment contract. And then the next, Yeah, I also echo with Mayuda and also Fajar. The domestic workers and the distant water fishermen, they have to be covered by the Labor Standard Act in Taiwan. It's a long, unjust system for them that these two parts of the most vulnerable workers, they are not covered by the labor law in Taiwan. The most standard response from MOL, sorry to say, is always try to escape. They always said the distant water fishermen, they're under the jurisdiction of the fisheries agency, which we are very aware of, but we, all of the NGOs in Taiwan, we think that's not right. That's not right, because the fisheries agency, they don't have the expertise on the labor issues. You, MOL, is your jurisdiction. And then the maternity rights. I thank Mr. Su to mention about the babies issue, but actually not only the undocumented workers. I would say all of the women migrant workers, their maternity rights is severely ignored and violated. If any women migrant worker in Taiwan, they are pregnant, they will face the humiliation, the intimidation from the broker and employer to be sent home. So they have to choose by themselves whether to keep the baby or to keep the job. While our law clearly regulates and protects the rights of all women workers in Taiwan, regardless of their nationality. So these maternity rights is always ignored and violated. I would say MOL didn't do enough on that. And I have, and also one thing about the Indonesian government, I am a little bit disappointed, frankly, for the zero placement fee policy. We have been expecting for that for more than 1 year, for the very big, very remarkable statement that there will be a zero placement fee policy for the Indonesian migrant workers. But in the end, we found from the feedback, sorry, I don't understand Bahasa Indonesia, but from the feedbacks of many civil society, many migrant workers groups from Indonesia, I knew that is a total failure. The loan system you gave to the migrant workers actually made it another loan to them. There is no zero placement fee policy. Lastly, the pandemic situation made the situation of the migrant workers even worse. Many of them, just like what Fajar said, they are enduring a worse condition and stricter restrictions from the local citizens. Many of them, since last year when we had some major local outbreaks, many of the migrant workers, they are totally banned from going out from their workplace or their dorms or their house where they work. And in one county in northwest Taiwan, even the county mayor totally banned. He had a county-wide restriction to ban all the migrant workers from going out. This is absolutely a world level scandal. But that mayor and this terrible policy has never been punished by any government. Okay, now I start my part. I will make it very fast. I'll try my best. So, okay, this one. Okay, so, okay, this is, I will make it fast. So the new southbound policy. Well, the old one, there was an old one and a new one. The old one started from 1993. The main focus was to lower the reliance on China economically, to broaden the economic ties to Southeastern Asian countries. And actually, this is a common hidden theme or the hidden goal, even to the new southbound policy. Okay, so the new southbound policy, as some of you have been had introduced, these are the main categories. Some brief points. It's broadened. Okay, so now it's not only economic and trade. It's broadened to culture, agriculture, and also human resources, etc., etc. Okay, and now it's 18 countries, but actually the main focus is still the Southeastern Asian countries. Okay, the other countries is not that covered well. And okay, so the 4 points here, the talent exchange. That is what's relevant to our topic today. So what does it mean? I will just make it, okay, this is in brief, 3 parts about the human, okay, because we are talking about worker and human. These 3 major parts are relevant to people. First, education. The government introduced and encouraged more students from Southeastern countries to come. And yes, we already observed more students from Southeastern countries in Taiwan, which is good. And also the language of Southeastern countries have been encouraged in the elementary schools and the high schools. Okay, that is also very good. Industry, there are some blue-collar migrant work. The students part, actually, some of them work as interns, which cause many problems, which I will say later. And in industry, some blue-collar migrant workers, they might extend their years. I will also cover later. And for the new immigrants, which are, that's the term we use in Taiwan. They are marriage immigrants. Okay, they married to Taiwan. Before, they were heavily discriminated, but after the new southbound policy, the image has been changed. Okay, more or less, at least from the government's inputs. Okay, but in reality, on the education part, well, there are many problems actually. There have been many scandals, not a few. There are many scandals. Many universities, well, I would say, okay, some universities, they take it as a profit-making process because of the low birth rate. We have fewer and fewer students. Some schools, they use this channel to broaden their school, okay, to maintain their school. So they charge from students, and they introduce the students to work in the factories. Some of them, they are forced to work for very long hours. So some students, they come to study the skills and the lessons, but in the end, they are cheap labor. They are on and on for so many scandals exploded in the past few years, even until a few weeks ago, a few months ago. There are so many cases like that. And extension of the years of blue-collar migrant workers, well, it's not really practical and realistic because there are many thresholds which are very hard to achieve. Actually, the Taiwan government is always struggling whether to allow the migrants to become immigrants. And there are still some local conservative people, they don't like Southeastern Asian people to become immigrants. So this is always a struggle inside the government and in the society. So this is what's from the government. This is a long-term retention of skilled foreign workers program. Okay, so I make it very brief. What is this about? Okay, there are some qualification. This program, actually, it means for some migrant workers, blue collar, I mean, they can apply to stay longer, but there are salary qualification. Actually, Fajar already mentioned some. For the industrial, I mean the factory workers or construction, they have to have more regular salary, okay, more than 33,000, okay, or over $500,000. Sorry, I mean, I'm talking about NT dollars. You have the USD to check. And so social welfare means the caretakers. Their regular salary, once again, should be more than 29,000 NT dollar for the nursing facility caretakers, and 24,000 for the caretakers at home, which is totally beyond the reality. Okay, and skills qualification, they have to have some skills certificates, unless they have more than 35,000. And okay, so that's the basic requirements here. But what's the problem? Because the minimum wage in Taiwan this year, for example, is only 25,250 NT. So most of the migrant workers, their salary is only this. They can get more. They might get more if they have a lot of overtime. But overtime is not regular salary. Their program require the money should be regular salary. Okay, so I can totally assure very few migrant workers have a real regular salary, which is much higher than the minimum wage. That is too few. There are a lot of domestic caretakers. Their salary is over 17,000, which is the minimum in Taiwan. But again, in the contract and on their salary list, usually it's still 17,000. The extra few thousand is not considered as part of the salary. It's like benefits or something. It might be hard to take that as regular. So in brief, the program is unrealistic. Okay, very few, I believe, very few blue-collar migrant workers can really apply for that. And new immigrants, well, actually many foreign spouses and their children have been discriminated before by their families, by the school teachers, and the whole society. There have been some tragedies happened before. I don't want to mention here. So actually, under this kind of social discrimination, for many years, many of the second generation of the foreign spouses, they tend not to say too much about their usually mothers, their Southeastern Asian parent, and it's not easy for them to learn their culture and language. Well, luckily, in the past few years, it's changed a little bit, but it's not that fast. Okay, this is a long process. You're encountering the whole social discrimination. It won't be changed so fast in just a few years. And rules, is there any change? Okay, after that, the only thing, okay, I will say, for the new southbound policy, what is relevant to migrant workers? The only thing directly relevant is the midterm skilled workers program, which I found totally unrealistic and nothing more. The laws, regulations, and policies on migrant workers in general are the same. And some of the laws, as Fajar mentioned, are even worse. Last year, MOL introduced a new amendment on the Employment Service Act, which make it harder for which we call cross-category transfer. So for the caretakers who wants to transfer to the factory, they have to wait for 2 weeks when after they are registered in a certain employment center, and no employer of her category wants to hire her, which is already a little bit hard for them. So why there's such a change? Because of the pressure from the employers and the brokers group. So it's clear MOL feel the pressure from the employer and broker much 10 times more than the migrant workers and human rights groups. For that change, they totally ignore, 100% totally ignore the feedbacks from the civil society. Okay. And migrant workers' freedom of movement is being severely violated during the COVID-19 pandemic. But the government, they rarely, if ever, corrected and punished any employer or broker, or even government official, as I mentioned. And domestic workers and fishermen on distant water fishing vessels are still excluded from the Labor Standard Act. And the vicious two-tier system, that's the system. One of the distant water system was mentioned by Yuda, the guarantee letter system. Okay, that is the distant water. Okay, they are still excluding the fishermen from this distant water are still excluded from the Labor Standard Act. Okay, it's still no change at all. Okay, so what we should do, what we can do, as a civil society, actually, while MOL, they rarely inquire the unions or groups from the migrant workers or for the migrant workers, we should do more. We should have more, or we should have more cooperation between us across the country. We should promote the fair recruitment, fair working condition in Taiwan, regardless of the nationality, and pressure all the relevant governments to enforce the sending and the receiving country. And we should develop a cooperation to make a platform of a reporting system, so the violation can be addressed and done. And urge all the relevant governments to include the rights of migrant workers in the MOU and trade talks. This is also very important. because actually the core of new southbound policy is trade and economy. So if we always urge the government to put these human rights and labor rights and migrant workers in this trade talk, they cannot avoid, okay? And urge Taiwan and all the relevant government to ratify the relevant ILO conventions. One of our audience mentioned another one, which is not here. Yeah, I fully agree. We should urge them to include. Taiwan is not a part of UN, but we have a domesticalization process, which is almost the same. We can still do that in Taiwan. So these are some of the conventions we should urge the government to ratify. And also for human rights due diligence legislation, there is such a thing in Europe. Actually, it's guided by UN. And in EU, just a few months ago in February, there is a proposal already, a proposal for a directive on corporate sustainability due diligence and annex. Okay. And we know that in California, in some countries in Europe, in Australia, and in New Zealand, they have, but in Asian wide, there's none. So we should urge our respective governments to pass similar laws and enforce it. Okay. And lastly, nothing about the migrants without the migrants. Any policy, any legislation, any change of the practices, any relevant government must consult with the voices from the migrant workers, whether either from the migrants themselves or from the CSO and NGOs and unions working with and for the migrant workers. So yeah, so thank you very much. This is my contact information. Okay, that's it. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Lennon, for your first response from the previous speakers, yeah, and highlighting the risk of the forced labor, which is actually very high with regard to the very high cost of placement fee. And you actually addressing that question as well to Pak Yuda on the Indonesian side, Indonesian government side, how to, what is actually now the constraint with regard to this cost structure to prevent a high placement fee. And you highlighted again the seafarers issue with regard to jurisdiction of the Ministry of Labor and other ministry, right? You have a very strong position that this should be included in the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Labor on the part of Taiwan government. And you again echoed what has been said by Fajar on the women's right, maternity right. You know, you even strongly say that almost all severely ignored the right of the maternity right of the domestic worker particularly. And thank you for sharing as well a broader perspective of new southbound policy, yeah, with regard particularly on the education, which apparently become one way of another ways of misusing this policy as a way to get a cheap labor through a training scheme program included in the training program, in the school program, you know, by holding a diploma. So those kind of practice basically deviant or is not in line with the policy itself. Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that. And now we come up to the discussion time. The discussion time what we have here is very short. You know, we're supposed to close at 4 o'clock, but I would like to ask all of us to extend it at least 15 minutes, right? 15 minutes, so we then close at 4:15. Now, before I go to give some response from the audience, there is a response actually from written response from which has to be addressed. You know, one is from Pak Abdul Rahim Sitorus, addressed to Mr. Su, and for from Isabel, addressed actually to Dr. Su as well. And then Isabel also raised question to Ibu Fajar with regard to the collaboration with the union, whether you got a restriction from your own employers. Let us start first with this, yeah, and then after this explanation, I will give the floor to Ascensius Guntur and then Isabel Cheng, who already raised their hands. So first, I'd like to invite Dr. Su to respond, and then Pak Yuda, and then Ibu Fajar, and then I'll give to the audience 2 speakers to do the oral intervention who are already raising their hand. Over to you, Dr. Su.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think under the new southbound policies, Taiwanese and Indonesian people continue to the best partner. So I think we have so many problems in Taiwan, right? But we are willing to dialogue and sort out. For example, the executive yuan already established a working group with government and NGOs to tackle the problems of domestic workers. So we try to listen all opinions from different stakeholders. That's the first one. Then the second one, the domestic workers right now is not under the labor law, which is not under labor standard laws, but they are covered by occupational safety insurance law. On this 1st May 2022. And I think the new arrival domestic workers could be recruitment by agencies, but also they can recruit by the employer directly. So the Taiwanese government and the Indonesia government work with the direct hiring program, and we are looking forward to cooperate further. And the domestic workers or migrant workers, when they can't holding their documents or ARC, in this case, they can complain to the 1955. We will help them out, and the government will revise the laws to prohibit the employer to holding their documents in the future. For the pregnant workers, both the local worker and the migrant workers, they are under the law to protect their rights. The employer cannot dismiss when they are pregnant. We also established a center in Taoyuan to service those pregnant workers. And I think the all violation cases and all problems can go to 1955, and we have a dialogue channel to NGOs. So we are willing to listen all different opinions, and we can continue to discuss and figure out and find a way to keep the good relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Su. May I now invite Pak Yuda to make your short response from the presentation that we heard so far and from the question already raised.
Thank you, Pak Ravandi, and thank you for other resource person for presenting their ideas and also issue. I really take note on whatever has been raised so far. And for Bu Fajar, thank you very much, Bu, for giving us insight what happened on the ground with regard to the protection of Indonesian migrant workers, especially the blue-collar workers, as you mentioned before. And in this regard, also, of course, we in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and as well as IETO office in Taiwan would like to enhance collaboration with CSO and also Indonesian community in Taiwan, because we do understand with regard to the magnitude of number of Indonesian living in Taiwan, as well as the cases. Of course, IETO alone cannot solve the problem. Yeah, it needs collaboration from CSO as well as Indonesian community in Taiwan. With regard to the consular services or public service provided by IETO in Taiwan, I take note on that. I will coordinate with a relevant office in Indonesia, especially you mentioned about the extension of passport as well as shelter, Bu, yeah, shelter. For shelter, of course, we have provided specific shelter for Indonesian national facing a problem in Taiwan, but of course, yeah, we only have limited space, yeah. And in this regard, we have provide some guidelines for Indonesian national would like to seek access to the shelter. Of course, the priority is given to Indonesian national having some vulnerabilities. Of course, because of limited space, we need to put some prioritization for access to the shelter. And Pak Wong, you mentioned about zero cost. Yeah, Pak. We take note on that, Pak. We will liaise with our colleague in BP2MI, Indonesian Agencies for Protection of Indonesian Migrant Workers, who issued this regulation. Yeah, according to our law, law number 18, 2017, pertaining to protection of Indonesian migrant workers, the law already stated that Indonesian migrant workers cannot be borne the recruitment cost or placement cost. Yeah, cannot be burdened by that recruitment cost. That's why, in this regard, we also quite concerned about the very high recruitment costs or placement costs for Indonesian migrant workers in Taiwan. If this high cost cannot be find solution, yeah, it will create a problem for both sides, both for Indonesian migrant workers in Taiwan, because they have to pay or to their salary, the monthly salary has to be deducted, yeah, to pay this cost. And secondly, the family in Indonesia also have same problem, because this cost has to somehow will affect their families in Indonesia. We look forward to discuss this issue, yeah, about the cost structure in detail between TETO and IETO to find a solution for this issue. And then for Mr. Su, we already monitor that actually the protection of Indonesian migrant workers working in domestic sector is already covered by occupational safety law in Taiwan. But of course, for us, this is not sufficient. We do hope that there is no discrimination between formal sector and informal sector, because the Indonesian migrant workers working in domestic sector should be regarded as formal sector, just like other migrant workers in formal sector. So we hope there's no discrimination for our domestic sector. I think that's all, Pak Effendi and other colleague, my response. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Pak Yuda, for carefully responding to all issue and raised by speakers and participants. May I invite Ibu Fajar to give a short answer to Isabel, and then I give the floor to Isabel and the other person. Ibu Fajar, over to you.
Oke, terima kasih ya atas pertanyaan dari Ibu Isabel. Saya akan jawab dulu, yaitu bagaimana atasan dan agensi saya melihat aktivitas yang saya lakukan dan apakah mereka mendukung. Kebetulan untuk saat ini saya sudah tidak memakai lagi agensi ataupun juga yang tadi sudah dijelaskan oleh Mr. Su, bahwa di Taiwan ada namanya program direct hiring tanpa agensi. Jadi ketika saya meminta libur, hak kenaikan gaji, sudah tidak ada intervensi dari agensi lagi. Saya negosiasi dengan mereka sendiri. Dan sebenarnya kami juga berharap bahwa untuk program direct hiring ini bukan hanya untuk sektor PRT saja yang ada di Taiwan, namun juga untuk sektor lain dari pabrik, ABK, dan juga panti jompo, sehingga apa yang kita inginkan ketika kita minta libur dan juga semuanya, tidak ada lagi penekanan dari agensi. Iya Bu ya. Dan kemudian untuk masalah bagaimana saya bisa berkomunikasi dengan organisasi, kebetulan saya mempunyai libur 2 kali dalam sebulan. Dan libur 2 kali dalam sebulan yang dipunyai oleh PRT, ini tidak semua pekerja migran rumah tangga mempunyainya. Dan hari libur saya gunakan untuk berdiskusi ya dengan teman-teman dari organisasi lokal, ya kan? Ataupun juga dari diskusi itu tadi ada tindak lanjut, dan kami juga aktif dalam mobilisasi kebijakan dengan mengikuti aksi demonstrasi dan sangat mendukung ya untuk perubahan kebijakan itu. Namun dari berbagai puluhan aksi-aksi yang kami lakukan hingga hari ini dari pemerintah Taiwan belum ada respon yang signifikan. Dan kemudian kami berjejaring dengan organisasi yang di luar negeri. Ini kami juga memakai jaringan internet ya, online, melalui Zoom ataupun dengan komunikasi melalui WhatsApp ataupun aplikasi internet lainnya. Dan hal ini dampak dari pandemi juga, bagaimana kami bisa untuk menguatkan dari pekerja migran yang ada di Taiwan, dan juga kami berharap adanya masukan-masukan ketika kami sharing dengan pekerja migran di beberapa negara penempatan lain. Dan satu hal lagi yang membuat kami terkejut adalah biaya service agency yang diberlakukan seumur hidup kontrak ketika masih resmi hanya ada di Taiwan yang dibebankan kepada pekerja migran. Untuk negara lain tidak ada. Kalau negara-negara lain, biaya service agency hanya dibebankan ketika masih ada potongan dengan bank yang ada di Indonesia. Namun untuk Taiwan tidak. Kami harus membayar biaya service agency seumur hidup kontrak ketika memakai jasa mereka. Terima kasih Ibu Isabel. Dan untuk Pak Yuda, kami tunggu juga ya untuk implementasi apa yang Bapak tadi uraikan, dan juga untuk Mr. Su, kami berharap juga ada perbaikan, bukan hanya sekedar omong kosong atas apa yang dijanjikan selama ini. Terima kasih.
Oke, terima kasih Ibu Fajar sudah merespon dengan sangat baik, dan saya kira mudah-mudahan ya apa yang disampaikan Ibu ini benar-benar menjadi catatan serius. So, sorry. Thank you so much now Ibu Fajar for giving the answer to to Isabel and responding to what Pak Yuda said. Let us hope that after this webinar, there are some important notes that can be taken into action further by both governments, both from the Taiwanese government and the Indonesian government. May I now invite the speakers to give your oral intervention first. I have 3 on the list, Pak Asensius, and then Ibu Isabel, and then the third one, Pak Abdul Rahim Sitorus.
Yeah.
Please make your presentation short and introduce shortly as well what is your background. Pak Asensius Guntur, over to you.
Selamat sore semua. Saya pakai bahasa Indonesia saja Bapak ya.
Yes, Pak Asensius, we have translation.
Saya Asensius Guntur, Direktur Stella Maris International Migrant Service Center di Kaohsiung, Taiwan Selatan. Tapi sekarang saya lagi libur di NTT. Shelter kami itu sudah menampung 3.255 PMI, migran dan ABK. Itu kalau setiap tahunnya sekitar 2.500 hari, itu berarti kita sudah tampung 8 jutaan. Dan dalam topik ini kita berbicara tentang southbound policy. Memang southbound policy ini sudah dimulai seperti yang kata Lennon itu 93. Dan waktu itu fokusnya pada politik dan ekonomi. Karena One China policy dan juga karena masalah investasi. Mereka mendorong orang Taiwan untuk melakukan investasi di Asia Tenggara dan Australia dan beberapa negara lain. Tetapi southbound policy ini ya yang ditawarkan dengan new southbound policy itu yang menariknya ada people to people, di mana mereka juga mempromosikan sosial budaya dan pendidikan. Tapi dari southbound policy ini saya rasa pengaruhnya terhadap kehidupan migran dan ABK di Taiwan itu tidak terlalu nampak. Ya. Tadi teman-teman saya Lennon dan Ibu Fajar bercerita tentang perbedaan gaji antara domestic worker dan ABK. Memang kalau kita lihat perbedaan gaji domestic worker misalnya, kenapa mereka gaji seperti itu? Karena mereka masuk di sektor privat. Sektor privat mereka beralasan setiap keluarga itu punya kemampuan ekonomi yang beda-beda. Sehingga gajinya juga bisa menentukan tinggi rendahnya, makanya mereka takar hanya 17.000 lebih. Dan kalau memang kita harus memperbaiki itu, maka yang perlu kita lakukan advokasi itu bagaimana memasukkan caretaker itu dalam sebuah institusi. Itu yang di mana kami salah satu anggotanya selalu melakukan advokasi bagaimana memasukkan PRT itu ke dalam sebuah institusi, karena kalau masuk dalam sebuah institusi, maka mereka bisa dilindungi dengan hukum. Kemudian dengan ABK, kebanyakan ABK itu mendapatkan gaji yang beda, khususnya LG, karena mereka beralasan bahwa mereka direkrut di luar negeri untuk bekerja di luar perbatasan Taiwan. Dan karena itu mereka mendapatkan gaji yang beda. Tetapi kalau kita berargumen dengan mereka, kita harus berpikir bahwa ABK ini menghasilkan keuntungan ekonomi bagi Taiwan. Beberapa tahun lalu saya baca berita, keuntungan pemasukan 1 tahun dari industri ini 1,9 billion. Kemudian saya coba lihat perbandingkan dengan gaji ABK. Gaji ABK standar itu 450 kali 12 bulan kali 30.000, sekitar 30.000 ABK, maka hanya mendapat total gaji itu hanya 162 juta. Itu berarti kurang dari 10% dari total pemasukan tahunan. Maka karena itu kami menuntut pemerintah Taiwan waktu itu untuk menaikkan gaji. Dan berita terakhir tentang gaji ABK itu dalam bulan Juli gaji akan dinaikkan menjadi 550. Tetapi tetap kita ngotot bersama teman-teman NGO lainnya untuk membuat gaji, untuk memperlakukan mereka seperti pekerja formal di Taiwan, di mana mereka mendapatkan gaji 25.000 NT. Kemudian masalah yang kedua yang saya mau tawarkan, yang saya mau sampaikan itu masalah perlakuan terhadap ABK itu bisa dipengaruhi PRT itu kerap kali terjadi karena juga teman-teman ABK kita, teman-teman PRT kita, pendidikannya agak kurang dan mentalnya tidak kuat. Kebanyakan teman-teman kita itu lebih cenderung menangis duluan dan tidak menyiapkan bukti kalau melakukan pengaduan di 1955. Maka ketika ada negosiasi di Depnaker itu yang jelas pihak agensi dan pihak majikan itu mereka lebih kuat argumentasinya karena mereka tidak memiliki, karena teman-teman kita dari PRT tidak memiliki bukti yang kuat. Karena itu kalau saya anjurkan kepada pemerintah Indonesia, mungkin sebelum mereka ke sini diajarkan lebih kuat lagi bagaimana cara prosedur pelaporan. Mereka harus diajarkan, dididik untuk menyiapkan bukti yang lengkap kalau mereka diperlakukan tidak adil di tempat kerja. Kemudian sampaikan ke mereka juga organisasi-organisasi yang membantu PRT di sana, supaya sebelum mereka lapor 1955, mereka siapkan bukti yang kuat supaya nanti mereka bisa menang dalam negosiasi. Dan masalah ABK kita itu, saya mengunjungi ABK dalam setahun itu saya bertemu dengan 3.000 ABK, sekitar 3.000 ABK. Ngobrol dengan mereka, organisir kegiatan dengan mereka. Dan memang mereka mengalami banyak masalah. Tahun 2021 saya mengurus masalah 98 ABK. Keluhan yang mereka sampaikan ke kita itu masalah gaji, pemotongan gaji, bahkan ada yang tidak dibayar sama sekali sampai 14 bulan. Kemudian masalah asuransi jiwa, masalah perlakuan yang tidak adil, kurangnya makanan, dan banyak masalah lainnya. Dan menurut saya masalah-masalah ini harus ditindak. Tetapi kerap kali masalah ini itu dilakukan oleh para agensi, para agen. Persoalan paling besar ini dalam hukum Taiwan itu kita tidak bisa mempidanakan agen karena kontrak kerjasama dalam hukum Taiwan itu antara pekerja dan majikan. Sehingga kalau misalnya agen yang melakukan itu kadang susah untuk kita tindak. Dan yang terakhir ini masalah dokumen. Saya sudah sampaikan beberapa kali ke Bapak Juda. Di Taiwan itu kita punya jumlah migran dan ABK itu terbanyak dari semua negara pengirim migran dan ABK. Tetapi kantor dagang kita itu hanya punya kantor satu di Taipei. Sementara kalau kita bandingkan dengan teman-teman dari Filipina, mereka punya kantor itu ada 3. Satu di Taipei, satu di Taichung, satu di selatan di Taichung, satu di Kaohsiung. Dan sehingga dengan adanya 3 kantor ini, mereka dengan cepat melayani para pekerja mereka. Tidak hanya melayani dengan cepat, itu juga mengurangi ongkos dari proses dokumen. Kalau kita dengar dari ABK, banyak ABK dan PRT atau migran yang lain di sektor formal, itu kalau mereka urus dokumen itu bayarnya 8.000, 10.000. Kamu bayangkan kalau ribuan atau ratusan ribu teman-teman kita yang butuh proses itu, dan harus bayar dengan angka itu untuk mengurus paspor, itu paling sulit. Itu kita rugi banyak, uang keluar banyak. Karena itu kalau bisa diusulkan ke pemerintah untuk membangun kantor baru di selatan, supaya mempermudah proses dokumen dan juga mengurangi ongkos. Dengan itu kita menyelamatkan teman-teman kita yang yang migran dan ABK. Saya rasa saya ngomong terlalu banyak. Mohon maaf kalau ada yang kurang dan terima kasih atas kesempatan.
Terima kasih Pak Sensius Guntur, very informatif walaupun agak panjang ya. Tapi 3 usulan baik. 3 usulan tuh the three options, 3 proposal you have already mentioned that. Thank you so much for that. I'd like now to invite Isabel and then Pak Abdul. Over to you, Isabel.
Thank you very much for having me, and it's great to join you here from Portsmouth. In the UK, I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Portsmouth, and I research on migrant workers. And what you said here today is everything, anything I need to know. So I have questions raised in the chat, but I also wanted to raise again that one of the things I asked is about health examinations. I know that the government since 1992 has put in place, the Taiwanese government has put in place a thorough examination process for migrant workers to enter Taiwan in order to prevent the possibility of foreign workers bringing diseases to Taiwan. However, this is implemented by various decrees. I have seen research raise a question about whether this is constitutional, because one person failing the health examination would run the risk of being repatriated. And this seemed to be disproportionate. I've seen discussion about this, but I don't know whether this is really the case, because the law has been in place for more than 3 decades. And one of the things we talk about today about women's pregnancy was part of that law. The women's pregnancy was prevented for nearly 20 years until gender equality law moved that out of the health examination. So women failing pregnancy test in the past will be considered as failing a health examination, and women face the possibility of being repatriated. Whether this kind of system is considered constitutional or not, I don't know. I've seen research, but I don't know how the government thinks about this. This is my first question. Second question is taken from what Fajad replied to us. It's very encouraging to see that you standing up and arguing the fair treatment. But the government of Taiwan relies a lot on the reporting from NGOs, because this is part of the process. The government informed the US government of their anti-trafficking measures. So I wonder whether from Mr. Su's point of view, whether the Taiwan, because you said that you are listening, you're happy to listen, you're happy to take advice from everywhere, but I wonder whether the foreign migrant workers self-help organizations set up by people like Fasha are also part of the consultation you would take on. And finally, if I may, I am leading a project documenting activists like Fasha or Anas's efforts. I really hope that I could talk to you privately to document your experiences so that more people can be inspired by you. So if this event is recorded, then I hope I can get access to it. And also I hope I can invite both of you to join this documenting project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabel, for your questions. And I think I'll give later to Dr. Su to give a short response on that. May I invite Pa Abdul Rahim? So now, because we have also take a look at the time. Now it's already 4:18. Let us try 4:30 as a closing of our session. So that means we have 4:25. I give it back to the MC, and MC will give it to the closing remarks. Let us ask Pa Abdullah first. Abdul Rahim Sitorus. Over to you, Pa. Okay, Pak Abdul, you are unmute now. Over to you.
Oke, ini saya bahasa Indonesia bisanya ya. Mohon maaf ya.
Yes, it's okay. It's okay.
Terima
There is
kasih.
a translator. No problem.
Oke Pak. Terima kasih Pak Arvendi ya. Oke, terima kasih. Langsung saja Pak. Pertanyaan saya tadi, saya ini prinsip, kenapa Taiwan selama ini justru getol, sangat kuat, sangat keras menolak atau tidak menerima prinsip konvensi ILO ya, 181 ILO yang menegaskan bahwa ya yang namanya pekerja migran itu semestinya tidak sepatutnya dibebani biaya penempatan. Nah, ini pertanyaan pokok yang saya tujukan kepada pemerintah Taiwan lah. Sementara Indonesia sudah punya undang-undang pelindungan pekerja migran Indonesia yang mengadopsi ketentuan ILO yang prinsipnya membebankan biaya itu kepada pihak majikan. Jadi kemarin sempat rame ketika Kepala BP2MI mengumumkan semestinya PMI itu tidak boleh dibebani biaya penempatan, ternyata mendapat reaksi yang negatif dari ya umumnya para majikan lah yang mungkin merasa dirugikan. Ini ingin saya tanyakan kepada Pak Su lah. Kenapa kok konvensi ini tidak diberlakukan? Itu prinsipnya. Kemudian hal-hal yang lain, saya mencoba mempelajari tentang Employment Act. Kebetulan saya seorang pengacara yang sudah mengadvokasi kasus-kasus overcharge sejak tahun 2016. Salah satunya saya mendorong didirikannya Serikat Buruh Migran Indonesia di Taiwan. Tahun 2016 saya sudah uji coba mengajukan, mendorong PMI, kawan-kawan yang korban overcharge, mengajukan, bukan mengajukan gugatan, tapi ketika itu malah digugat oleh finance, Avaford Finance ya, ketika itu, karena dia dikenakan biaya penempatan berlebihan, overcharge. Ternyata saya bekerja sama dengan pengacaranya LBH Taiwan, itu bisa memenangkan kasus. Sementara pengalaman sebelumnya ada pekerja migran Filipina sempat menolak tuntutan finance, Avaford juga ketika itu saya baca kasusnya, dia tidak bisa berhasil memenangkan kasusnya. Setelah saya pelajari banyak hal yang menjadi akar persoalan overcharge, terjadinya pungutan biaya penempatan berlebih, yang sebenarnya merupakan salah satu indikator kerja paksa berbentuk jeratan hutang yang mencekik lehernya kawan-kawan pekerja migran, baik itu domestik maupun yang tergolong istilah kita itu formal ya, walaupun dikategorikan oleh pemerintah Taiwan sebagai kerah biru. Nah, ini pertanyaan kita, jawaban yang harus kita cari bersama. Akar persoalan sebenarnya karena terjadi perbedaan dua sistem hukum antara Indonesia dengan Taiwan. Oleh karena itu, kita sarankan jalan keluarnya harus dibuat, ditetapkan bersama antara Taiwan dengan Indonesia, sekurang-kurangnya MOU lah. Karena kita tahu antara Indonesia dengan Taiwan tidak ada hubungan resmi. Ini persoalan kita, makanya kalau hari ini kebetulan Pak Yuda hadir, ada baiknya juga kita singgung hal ini. Karena kasus itu pun sempat saya diskusikan, saya minta bantuan kepada Pak Lalu Iqbal sebelum Pak Yuda ini supaya mendukung gugatan kita di pengadilan Taiwan ketika itu. Ya. Jadi itu persoalan, akar persoalannya ada penyeludupan hukum. Dari kacamata itu tergolong penyeludupan hukum. Pungutan di Indonesia sebetulnya sudah berlebih, apalagi sekarang itu sudah dikategorikan sebagai tindak pidana, tapi menurut aturan hukum Taiwan ini tidak dikategorikan sebagai tindak pidana. Jadi ketika PMI digugat melalui pengadilan untuk membayar hutang, dia tidak bisa berbuat apa-apa karena alat bukti semua menunjukkan dia memiliki hutang itu. Padahal setelah kita telusuri dengan bukti-bukti yang ada berdasarkan aturan hukum Indonesia, ini sebenarnya praktek penipuan. Praktek tindak pidana penipuan karena ada ternyata pemalsuan dokumen segala macam. Jadi di sini juga muncul persoalan hukum perdata internasional. Jadi akar persoalannya adalah hukum publik internasional dan hukum perdata internasional. Idealnya dalam MOU antara Taiwan dan Indonesia ini akhir Desember besok mestinya sudah bisa ada kesepakatan bersama. Kita dorong juga kawan-kawan di Taiwan ini melakukan upaya-upaya perubahan kebijakan terhadap Employment Act-nya Taiwan lah. Kemudian standar VICAS-nya Taiwan kan ada juga aturan itu. Ini yang menarik juga ternyata ini berbeda dengan negara penempatan yang lain. Taiwan itu sudah ada kepastian hukum, hubungan hukum antara pekerja migran dengan agensi Taiwan. Cuma ini kan hubungan keberdataan. Masalahnya MOU kita yang sekarang ini mewajibkan setiap PMI yang tidak boleh mandiri atau yang tergolong kerah biru untuk tetap memakai dua jasa agensi. Ini akar persoalannya. Mengakibatkan biaya penempatan mahal. Maka wajar saja apabila justru pihak majikan pemberi kerja menolak kalau biaya penempatan ini jadi mahal. Prinsipnya sebenarnya sesuai konvensi bisa kita pahami dan Undang-Undang Pelindungan PMI, biaya penempatan itu harus murah. Maka solusi salah satu yang ideal sebenarnya seperti kata Pak dari SPA ini, Direktur Pak Landon Wong itu ya harus mandiri, direct hiring. Sementara kendalanya Indonesia tidak membolehkan direct hiring. Nah, di sini makanya ada persoalan-persoalan yang harus dirembuk bersama melalui yaitu tadi kesepakatan bersama. Duduk bersama antar Indonesia dengan Taiwan. Saling menghargai, tidak bisa hanya sepihak. Tanpa adanya perjanjian atau saling pengertian antara Indonesia dan Taiwan, ini mustahil persoalan-persoalan menyangkut perlindungan hak asasi manusia pekerja migran itu akan terpenuhi, apalagi dimajukan. Ini saran saya, ke depan saya berharap dengan kawan-kawan SPA juga, dengan kawan-kawan Ganas ya Mbak Fajar, kita sama-sama melakukan advokasi lah, baik itu aturan hukum Indonesia dan aturan hukum Taiwan. Terakhir ini, baru-baru ini, tanggal 22 April 2022, Pak Yuda, saya baru baca keputusan Kepala Badan 101 tahun 2002. Intinya, biaya penempatan itu yang semestinya tidak boleh dibebankan kepada PMI, justru oleh Kepala Badan boleh dibebankan dan nilainya, jumlahnya, itu lebih besar dibandingkan masa lalu. Biaya makin mahal itu, makanya ini persoalan PR kita juga di Indonesia. Nanti bagaimana kita diskusikan bersama dengan kawan-kawan di Taiwan. Banyak PR, saya jadi bingung juga. Mudah-mudahan ke depan forum ini menyangkut ya istilahnya regional ya, yang diinisiasi kawan BBSA dan HRWG, Mas Daniel ini saya sangat terima kasih sekali karena saya juga berupaya harus ada forum-forum semacam ini untuk saling berdiskusi baik antar pemerintah dengan ataupun dengan kawan-kawan yang serikat atau NGO di Indonesia maupun Taiwan. Ini terima kasih sekali.
Baik.
Sebentar itu dulu. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Abdurrahim Sitorus atas usulan konkret terkait dengan MOU yang harus mempertimbangkan hukum-hukum yang sepadan di antara kedua negara. Thank you for your intervention that already proposed to consider the use of equal law between the two countries with regard to the content of the possible MOU between Taiwan and Indonesia. I'd like now to invite all speakers. We are running out of time. There are a lot of things can be discussed, but we need to stop the discussion because not because of the time, but because of the time allocated. And please, I'd like to invite each speaker to give a short response to what has been said, as well as a closing statement, or you can make it as a closing statement as well. Just about 1 minute, and then after that I will close it without making any summary or anything. So then I can give it to Pak Fajar, because I'm sure that this is going to be a continued discussion, with regard to the BBC network, from the cross-regional network to protect migrant workers. May I invite Dr. Su, 1 minute for your closing remarks and response. Dr. Su? Dr. Su, are you still available? Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Please, 1 minute.
Okay. I think first one is all the problems or advices about the fishermen or distance water fishermen. We will refer to the Agricultural Council and the MOL with the executive, and we will continue to discuss and figure out how to fix those problems. That's the first one. And the second one, the healthy examination regulations has no pregnant items for either entry Taiwan or periodically examination. There's no more these items. So the employer could not repatriate migrant worker because of their pregnancy. If there has any dispute, they can solve through the labor dispute procedure. The third one, I want to say that there is the agency management will have regulations in both Taiwanese and the Indonesia government, and the Taiwanese government never reject C181, but I think we can study on it, the issues. But right now we already have regulation to manage those agencies. Thank you.
And closing remarks. Pak Yuda, over
Thank
to
you, Pak Raffendi. I would like to focus my closing statement on the way forward. First, I really appreciate about this multi-stakeholders dialogue. Of course, our aim is not only for discussing this good idea emanating from this discussion this afternoon. The most challenges is how we can implement, how we can look forward to solving the issue at hand. Second, migration issue is a complex issue. Of course, we need to hear all stakeholders' views. Not only between official, but of course between stakeholder. Most importantly, from the migrant workers itself. That's why we need to involve not only colleague from CSO, but also from the migrant workers and also CSO. And lastly, when we are talking about migration issue, then we are talking about policy coherence between sending countries and receiving countries. In this regard, of course, Indonesia, IETO and TETO should take more role in discussing this issue, in the idea, with the view to providing safe migration corridor for Indonesian migrant workers working in Taiwan. For that reason, we look forward to having more in-depth discussion on how establishing the MOU between TETO and IETO to discuss about the placement and recruitment process protection for our migrant workers, especially in domestic sector, as well as in fishermen sector. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Yuda. Thank you for your closing remarks and looking forward to your way forward commitment. I'd like now to invite Ibu Fajar, please, a very short closing statement.
Oke, terima kasih. Kami berharap dari diskusi hari ini, dari semua pembicara, baik dari instansi negara kami sendiri ataupun juga dari pemerintah Taiwan, untuk benar-benar adanya perlindungan yang nyata bagi kami sebagai pekerja migran yang ada di Taiwan. Stop diskriminasi dan juga kekerasan, baik verbal ataupun fisik, dan juga stop perbudakan modern. Kami bekerja, sama-sama bekerja, kami juga mempunyai kontribusi ekonomi yang nyata di Taiwan, dan kami juga sebagai penghasil devisa untuk negara kami. Kami berharap implementasi hukum benar-benar ditegakkan, dan benar-benar adanya perlindungan yang seperti digadangkan oleh kedua negara. Jangan menjadikan kami tumbal ekonomi untuk sebuah peningkatan ekonomi di kedua negara, baik Indonesia ataupun Taiwan. Dan kami berharap sekali lagi bahwa dengan adanya diskusi hari ini, kami juga menanti janji-janji dari kedua pemerintah, baik dari pemerintah Indonesia dan juga dari pemerintah Taiwan itu sendiri. Dan untuk pemerintah kami yang ada di Indonesia, mohon untuk diperhatikan sekali lagi sistem perekrutan pengiriman pekerja migran yang kemarin sempat melibatkan dari pemerintah kami sendiri dengan adanya kasus PT Wika Wijaya Karya yang mengorbankan ratusan pekerja migran, dan kami berusaha memperjuangkan mereka untuk mengembalikan miliaran rupiah dari uang-uang dari para pekerja yang sudah dimanipulasi oleh perusahaan konstruksi di Taiwan. Kami berharap untuk ke depan tidak ada lagi hal-hal tersebut, dan untuk pemerintah Taiwan, sekali lagi, keberadaan kami diharap untuk ada perlindungan yang maksimal. Terima kasih untuk penyelenggara semuanya. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Bu Fajar. Last but not least, Lennon, your closing remarks.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Prof. Andy and all speakers. We have too many topics. We didn't even have time to respond. For example, the labor insurance for the domestic workers, the pension, which is totally exclude migrant workers, and the rights of family reunion. Okay, this is not, we didn't even touch on that part yet. And the medical, which Isabel very rightly mentioned, and I responded a little. The goal for the medical examination in Taiwan for the migrant workers, the goal is to make sure workable workforce, workable worker, not the health condition of the worker. Okay, so the cancer and many problems are not even in the list. There are so many migrants who have cancer. Like in our shelter, we have 8 of them. All of them are patients of cancers, and when they found it, it's already too late. So actually, so all in all, we really should treat the migrant workers as humans, as our local people. We should stop any kind of differences between them. We should enforce fair recruitment, fair working condition and living condition for all migrant workers. Treat them as humans, as locals. They are crucial to us. And open the door, make it bigger and wider for migrant workers who wants to stay longer, or even who wants to stay as a citizen. This is our obligation. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Lennon Wong, for your reminder that there are a lot of things which was not touched in the discussion because there has been so many issues. We do focus on discussion on the New South policy, but I hope that the discussion on the New South policy, the New Southbound policy, still be seen as an opportunity to improve and to stop all kind of violation, inconsistency on the implementation, as well as what on the gap of the implementation that has been raised during the discussion. And I'm happy that we have a discussion, a very rich discussion from coming from the duty holders, governments from Taiwan and Indonesian governments, and we heard as well from the human rights defenders as well as from the self-help organizations' views on what are the issues that need to be addressed immediately and in the long term as well. And I'd like to thank as well all who has been given inputs writtenly, especially those from the agencies. I see Pavilius already here giving an input. I'm sorry I didn't have time to really invite you to give your views, but your views has been presented by other colleagues from the agencies as well in the chat box. Now I'd like to invite everybody to give a round of applause for all speakers, a virtual applause to us, and give it back to the MC, Anna. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Arafendi. So this has been a very fruitful and very knowledgeable discussion between the speakers and of course our audiences. But before we'll have the closing remarks, may I request everyone or ask everyone to please open your camera. We'll have a quick photo sessions just for our remembrance or documentation. So, all right. Is someone from BBC ready? All right.
Silakan dibuka kameranya jika berkenan untuk kita melakukan foto session bareng-bareng. Sekali lagi, ya terima kasih. Kita hitung 1, 2, 3 nanti ya. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Anna. I give it back to you.
All right, thank you, Mas. So now we're on the last part of our program. May we now hear some closing remarks from Steering Committee Representative, Mr. Fajar Santaudi. Mr. Fajar, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, we come to the end. And Fajar, not the ganas one, but the less ganas. On behalf of Steering Committee of BBC, I would say thank you to everyone who have presented views, experience, and knowledge to us. This discussion has been very enriching, I believe, and especially for me, including for me who are outside of Taiwan. I'm from Malaysia, and there have been many points that I believe we should adopt all those inspirations, ideas that has been shared by many, especially so many realistic inputs from the ground, Pak Abdul Rahim Sitorus, from Ibu Fajar, from whoever. I'm sorry, I cannot mention everyone, but really this input has been overwhelming. So thank you again to everyone who already share your view, including everyone who write in the chat box, not forgetting all those views. Again, this kind of dialogue we can replicate. We should replicate. Especially, I come from Malaysia. I really hope to see these inspirations being shared here in Malaysia and also elsewhere. There are issues that's quite similar, and we can learn from this comparative discussion and studies. Thank you, everyone, and good evening.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fajar. So that wraps up our public policy discussion on the new southbound policy and its impact on the life of migrant workers in Taiwan. Let me just plug our organization. We are BBC, in exercising our advocacy. One of our activities is podcast recording featuring guests all over East and Southeast Asia who has knowledge on certain current events and migrant rights issue. Our latest podcast is about the military coup in Myanmar with Tual Kai from Chin State, and in relation to this topic, we have a podcast with Leonard Wong about the situation of the migrant workers in Taiwan. And also we have our online campaign called Here Are Stories, which showcase the works of our story fellows from our fellowship program. It aims to deliver stories about people on the move in East and Southeast Asia. So for collaborations, partnerships, and invitations, please feel free to contact us through email and social media. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our 4 speakers who shared their time and knowledge regarding this issue. Also to Mr. Rafendi for handling the public discussion. May this event could be a way to improve the life of our migrant workers, not only in Taiwan, but also all over the world. So this has been Anna saying thank you and see you on the next one. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Terima kasih, Pak.
Thank you, Anna.